Amy herself celebrating 5 years, right? Running the executive director of Kaleidoscope Youth Center, mom of 2, empty nester. They're gone. They're gone just recently. But what they're doing at Kaleidoscope Youth Center, I thought was very interesting. LGBTQIA youth. There's a lot of letters now. You're going to talk about that, right? So anyway, I thought that our mission from the hospital, we do some work with Kaleidoscope Youth, and we've looked to further that partnership. But I thought this could be a good time with the holidays approaching and all to remember that some youth don't get remembered, and some of them go to Kaleidoscope Youth Center where they are accepted. So I'll turn the time over to Amy to tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Clint, and thanks to all of you for having me here today. I'm thrilled to be here and to talk about Kaleidoscope Youth Center. As Clint said, we did recently move into the facility that is that building that's pictured on the screen, and your very own Steve Heiser had something to do with this. We were for 10 years in a space that was provided to us in kind by campus partners. And it was time. Now there's a big hole where that old house is. And when we got the 6 months notice that we needed to move, we found a great broker who knows Steve, and Steve represented the owner of our building, and we are just thrilled to be in this new space. So Kaleidoscope, we've been around since 1994. Established initially as a hotline in collaboration with Huckleberry House, which is a local nonprofit that serves homeless and runaway youth and their families. And quickly it was determined that really beyond the crisis mode for young people who are LGBTQ, they really needed a place to come to have substance-free, safe, proactive social activities and adult mentors, and so the Drop-In Center program was born. So we serve LGBTQ and ally youth ages 12 through 20, and our mission is to work in partnership with young people in Central Ohio to create safe and empowering environments for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender questioning, and queer and questioning youth through advocacy, education, support, and community engagement. And the vision is that LGBTQ and ally youth live healthy, whole lives with acceptance and freedom from oppression. So the terminology, the LGBTQIP, what does all of this mean, and why does it keep changing? So if any of you are unaware or a little confused about the language and how it changes, you're not alone. Even within the LGBT community, this language continues to change and is not always understood. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, I've thrown some in that you'll even hear me change it sometimes. Queer or questioning is the Q. I sometimes you'll see as intersex, and A would mean asexual or ally. And so why does all this keep changing from the days when it was just gay, to gay and lesbian, to gay and lesbian bisexual? It is a product of really a movement and a thinking that keeps expanding and working to be more inclusive. It seems like there's often someone who does not quite feel included, and so the notion around sexual orientation and around gender expression and identity keeps expanding. And I'll tell you, being the old lady at Kaleidoscope, it's the young people who really keep me up to date because their notions around these areas of identity just keep expanding. I think we have a 4-page, for a full training, there's a 4-page sheet that we've got with all kinds of definitions that are expanding around how people name themselves. So why a program just for LGBTQ youth? Why not just go to other good positive youth development programming that exists? Well, and it's because we know we're talking about a population of young people that really are at high risk for a lot of problems. You know, so we've got young people with higher absenteeism from school, and surveys and data that show that often we're talking about young people who don't feel safe in school, and they're often not going to school because they don't feel safe there. This affects their academic achievement, so we see some underachievement in academics, higher levels of anxiety and depression, lower self-esteem, much higher levels of substance abuse and addiction, you know, higher unplanned pregnancies and less safe sexual behaviors, higher rates of suicidal ideation attempts and completion, and the rates of homelessness and housing insecurity are far higher. Most stats I see show about 40% of homeless youth being LGBTQ. And so the problem is significant, and locally we have some tremendous unmet needs for especially young adults who are homeless, but especially those that are LGBT and really don't have safe places to go. So what are we doing about it at Kaleidoscope? So we know we have all these problems, but we also know we have some fantastic, amazing young people. And there's many young LGBTQ folks who are, and young people who are really very well adjusted and doing very well. And what allows for that? You know, years ago there was a place called the Search Institute that, they're still around, but they did research, and they were looking at why do you have one young person coming from a very difficult environment, you know, family circumstances and so forth, and they do really well, and you have another one who really struggles and has a hard time. And the Search Institute came up with 40 developmental assets, they called it. 40 things going on in their lives, and the more of those that young person had, the more resilient they were to the difficulty and the more successful they were. And that is in a lot of ways the basis of what we call positive youth development programs. So if we look at evidence-based or evidence-informed positive youth development programs, they include things that support resiliency or protective factors. So the key things that we have that we know from research really builds resiliency is family support, caring adults, positive peer groups, strong sense of self-esteem, and engagement in school and community activities. So these really build many of the assets. And they're also things, if you look at that list, are often things for a young person who is struggling with an identity, an LGBTQIA identity, that they may be struggling. If you think of pillars of support, they may be missing multiple ones. Are they struggling with support and acceptance from their families, from their peers, from their teachers, from their religious communities? Are they feeling supported at the Boys and Girls Club, the Y, and that's not a taint on any of those groups because they do excellent programming. So we're working to support all of these areas. Our centers open at 3:30 after school every day. Youth between 12 and 20 can just come. We have positive youth development programming, and key is this safe and affirming environment. And we really worked to support a culture of respect for all differences at Kaleidoscope. So young people find that mutual peer support, adult mentors, lots of purposeful activities, constructive activities. You think about these things, and if I quickly go back, these are all things that we all know support our own strength, right? This is not just a youth thing. This is part of why, probably, there might be a piece of why you're all here at Rotary around community and being of service and purpose. So our young people all need that, and LGBTQ youth need this safe environment that also affirms them at the same time. Some youth will come a few times, some come every day for years. And if they come to feel more comfortable within themselves and become more active in their school or their church or any kind of other, we've succeeded. We've succeeded if they are building that strength to be engaged in other places in their lives. So we've got health and wellness education activities. We've got a program called KYC Get Fit, and a doctor from Nationwide Children's has joined us in that program. They got a grant from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and they're really adding to our health and wellness programming every other week at Kaleidoscope. So leadership, we have leadership development, all house meetings every month. All young people can have a say, but we also have a youth leadership council that's engaged. We have supports for parents, very popular parents group that meets every week now. And young people come in. I've got crisis intervention, information, and referrals, because a lot of young people come in with some critical issues going on. And while we don't provide treatment, we provide information and access to where they can get support. So that's our daily programming. We also have an Ohio GSA Network, and like I told you, our alphabet soup keeps changing its meaning. And so GSA for a long time was Gay Straight Alliance Club. We've changed it to Genders and Sexualities Alliance. Sometimes you'll see QSAs as Queer Straight Alliance. So with that, we have a staff person that goes out and will do on-site visits with schools, with students, with staff, administration, to support the development of these clubs. And we know from research that those clubs improve the school climate, not only for the youth involved, but others as well. It also is engaging them in this purposeful, service-oriented activity and leadership development. So we network those groups so they can share best practices and challenges. And we have a youth leadership council that includes young people from GSAs around Central Ohio. And they organize these special events, youth conferences that they plan and lead and implement. Our alternative prom last year had 286 young people coming from 76 different schools. And you know, I don't brag to them about just what good-natured, what's the word I usually think of? It's just the most good-natured, sweet fun these young people have. And it always amazes me that they come from so many schools and create this really caring, kind community. This photo is from Pride last year. We had probably 300 people marching in the Pride March this year. We have Barbequeer and also a day of service every year. There's more than one day of service, but there's a day that we name that. And the other place, we work on safer, affirming spaces and services in the community. We do that through education for youth-serving professionals, and we also provide that for parents and families, and we do advocacy and a lot of networking with other nonprofits and services, and a lot of collaborations. Key community collaborations right now. We work with Southeast Mental Health, and we've done that for over 20 years. We have a staff person part-time from Southeast Mental Health who's part of Kaleidoscope programming. We work with Nationwide Children's Hospital. The image there is our interns from last year. We had 3 social work interns from the College of Graduate School of Social Work at Ohio State, and we had one from Capital. Columbus Public Health is regularly at the center doing HIV and STI testing and education. Equitas Health is involved in that as well. Huck House, now we provide space for counseling at the center. So what this does is it brings safe, affirming services to our young people at Kaleidoscope, and it also helps connect them with those services outside. You know, so when the doctor from Nationwide comes to Kaleidoscope, youth get to know her. They get to know they can be themselves and ask questions openly. And some of them are now going to see her as their primary physician. So we want to provide the services at the center and kind of be a hub to help lead them out to what they need out in the community as well. So our young people who really are, you know, you think about adolescence and what a hard time that is for everybody. And our LGBTQ youth really have some real additional challenges. And so my last slide is about how you can help. And when I think about supporting, You know, there are young people in your lives, and whether you know it or not, that are identifying as LGBTQ. And to be open and affirming with them and the people in your network, you undoubtedly know people whose children are LGBTQ, to be supportive in that and affirming of people's experience is really very probably more meaningful than you would know. That includes knowing that you are probably around young people struggling with it who may not be out with that, and what language is used and how it's talked about in those environments, it makes a big impact on young people. So you can make an impact in your own language and in what is said around, especially young people. Advocating for them. You can contribute to, you could contribute to Kaleidoscope or other organizations that are supporting young people, and volunteer. This is some of our superhero volunteers from other prom, where this year we had a theme of a superhero theme. So all of these folks come probably once a week and work with youth in the center. Sometimes we have groups come and do, help with the facility, maintenance, things like that. And we have board member volunteers who do a great job for us as well. So there's my contact information, and I'm happy to take any questions. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what is done during the days of service? What kind of service?
Oh, okay. So, she's asking what kind of thing is done during a day of service. Last year we had a group of youth, and what we do is we talk to them about what their interests are, and so that they're thinking what their priority is. And so the day of service is a group action, right? So last year they were especially interested in pets, and they, I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the organization, but they went and helped take care of the animals in an animal shelter. It was one of the smaller ones. So when we work on things like that, we're working with what is your passion as a group, and what would you like to do as a group? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Two questions. How many self-standing operations like yours are there in Columbus? And secondly, to what extent do you work with the religious community? How involved are the churches and the synagogues in our community?
So the first question was how many organizations like ours are. We are the only one like it in the state of Ohio, and so it is. When I see how meaningful our space and programs are for young people, I'm often concerned about the lack of it in other places. We have a gem in Columbus, Ohio, for our young people. And there are some programs, like in Cleveland, there's an LGBT center that has youth programming a few days a week, that sort of thing. And I'm not sure how many are across the country. I am in touch with other administrators for LGBT youth centers. I probably know of about 13 to 15 in the country, and a lot of them are about the same age. And in terms of religious involvement, we do get support from a number of churches, and I have come to speak for a number of congregations as well to talk about what we're doing. And I think there's a place for us to grow as well in terms of connecting with the religious communities and congregations. I think that for some young people is such a sense of loss or distress, when they don't feel affirmed by their religious community. And so we want to do everything we can not to direct any young person any specific direction, but for them to be aware of affirming places that they can go. The other thing is, when I say that, I would never direct any young person away from any particular religious affiliation. It's very legitimate for a young person to choose, whether they're going to go to a space that they consider affirming or stick with the place that, may not be affirming to their identity, but that they are deeply connected with in any way. So that's, when we're supporting a young person, it's about supporting them in looking at, what their values are and what the benefits are for them and what they want to do about it.
Where does your funding come from?
Our funding, we are a United Way member agency and have been since 2010, which is the largest single source of our support. Outside of that, every year it's a changing configuration of grants, so we have pretty much annually been getting something from the Columbus Foundation. The Keith Family Foundation is a private foundation that's been supporting our GSA Network for a number of years. And a lot of our corporate growth has really been increasing in recent years. So L Brands has been supporting us for many years. If I start a list, I'll forget someone very important. But that's probably our longest standing corporate support. And individuals, it's a pretty diverse funding. The Garden Party is our annual fundraiser. And that brings in corporate and individual support, and that overall is the largest source of our funding. We brought in over $120,000 last year, and only spent about $7,000 on the event. So that is our biggest source of unrestricted general operating support.
How do youth find out about Kaleidoscope, and how do they get involved with it?
A variety of ways. He asked how you find out about Kaleidoscope. They find out sometimes online. Often our best referrals are youth to youth, so youth who come and get their friends and say, hey, you got to come to Kaleidoscope. We get a lot of referrals from teachers, teachers that let youth know about us, mental health professionals. Sometimes they will come and to Kaleidoscope to tour with a young person before we have our programming to help them feel more comfortable. Parents as well, we get calls from parents many a week. Sometimes it's just for some support around oh my gosh, what do I do now? But also parents and family members looking for resources for their young people.
Where do the students, where do your youth come from as geographically? I mean, I should ask, approximately how many pass through the youth center in any given year, and where geographically, where do they come from in Central Ohio?
They really come pretty broadly from the Columbus metropolitan area. In 2015, we had over 400 individual youth coming for over 4,000 visits overall, and they came from 47 different zip codes. So one year we had an intern from Ohio State who was a geography student, and she mapped out where the youth came from, and it was such a great visual, and it really showed them spread across the metropolitan area. And most of them get to us by COTA bus. We do give bus passes to youth to get back home, and if they're regulars, we give them one to come back. Most of our youth, just to tell you a little more about them, the majority of them historically have been of very low economic means in terms of their household, and at the same time very diverse. So we have young people coming from families that have a lot of money and some that have very little, but the majority, the meal that we offer every day is a key meal of the day for many of the youth that come to the center. We've also tended to have a majority, probably barely, but a majority youth of color coming to the center. I think it's this opportunity in a lot of ways. It's something I don't necessarily see as much in the adult LGBT community, but when we look at this youth community coming to the center, it is such a diverse group in every way in terms of socioeconomic background and religious background and race and they really what's really beautiful about it is how they create, and we support this community of respect of all of those identities. And I say that, and it doesn't mean there's no issues that come up, but it's really pretty amazing, and that youth community understands the intersections of identity better than most of us adults do.
I just want to tell you all that every year in our Student Service Above Self project, we have at least one team of middle schoolers and typically at least one team of high schoolers who, on their own, take on this large issue. They themselves experience bullying or intolerance, and they want to get the message out, and they want to inform peers about all this. And every interaction that I've heard in my last 2 years with those teams, when they bring up Kaleidoscope, virtually everything they've ever said was really positive. So just an affirmation of you as a resource.
Thank you.
And I want to add a follow-up with Rick's comment, because I was at one of the schools where there was presentations at Northland, a freshman and a junior, and they were proud of the fact that they had as many straight students in their GSA at the school as they had gay students. And that, they felt that was bringing it out of the shadows and involving everybody and not being ashamed of it.
Absolutely. And you know, those allies, it's the other thing I think about at Kaleidoscope, and last year I looked, I think maybe 21% of the youth that had filled out the survey identified as straight. You know, and so, and that surprises people sometimes, but I also usually say, well, you know, we don't ask for your gay card at the door, and we're really just looking for a supportive environment. And a lot of those young people who don't identify as LGBT are finding a supportive, fun, all those other key things that we want in a positive youth development program are there for them too. The angle that, but there's this angle that is about a very safe place for the LGBTQ youth to be as well. And many allies are very dedicated to that.
I had recently read an article in Bravo about the crisis hotline, the suicide hotline that increased with our November change. Did that happen with Kaleidoscope, and do you have a crisis intervention?
She's asking about having read about the increase in phone calls to the suicide prevention hotlines in November, and you know, and our experience with that. And you know, it honestly, it was a concern, what that did, it led to more discussions at Kaleidoscope. It certainly, young people prior to November, because of some escalation of hateful messages, our young people were really feeling that, I would say, and there was a lot of discussion and fear about it, and a lot of feelings, you know, with the election around that too. And all of that just, you know, for me, redoubled the importance of the space we were providing for young people to be able to talk about it. And at the time, one of the other things that I did was I contacted John Ackerman over at Nationwide Children's Hospital, who is a suicide prevention specialist, and you know, to make sure to redouble and double check everything we were doing as well. So, one more question.
Building still on the election, and I hope I phrase this well. Obviously, a very polarizing election. People in the LGBTQ community have directly told me they have fear of the behavior, the future behavior of Trump supporters. And sitting in a room here where we clearly do have both Trump and Hillary supporters in here, and hopefully not a lot of people who just didn't vote. How does an organization like Rotary, who has its, you know, supporters of the president-elect, display to the LGBT community? We care just as much as we've always cared, and no, we will not accept this kind of bucket that we've been put in, no more than we want to put the LGBTQ community into a bucket itself. How can we move forward and help both for the kids and for the adults?
That's such a great question. I really appreciate that, and I think I think you spoke to the answer in what you said, which is really about the being able to express. I mean, that it's not about Republican or Democrat, that it's not about one candidate or other, but to make it clear to those in the LGBT community, adults and youth, that you don't support things that are demeaning to them, or that you're supportive of civil rights for LGBT young people. And it's so that conversation is probably going to be ongoing, and there should be opportunities to support the full humanity of LGBT people, and to be aware. I think for everyone, but we're always especially concerned for the young people in our community. When I talked about ways to support in different environments, that to speak up for the worth of young LGBT folks, even when maybe they can't. Does that make sense? Okay.
Snelson MMA, at 33 years ago, my son came out to us. He was a sophomore at Lime University. And I can't help but remember my football coach, good friend, who thought that my son was not worthy of being loved. And my God loves my son. And for a society that's 7 to 10% of our population, 7 to 10% of our population are this group, we should have 6 times the number, at least, organizations in Columbus, Ohio, like she has. Especially when these kids hear things from certain religious groups who believe they can be transformed. They cannot be transformed any more than you and I can. And hopefully none of you have grandchildren who have been born with this kind of a situation. But let me tell you, having been around my son, who's now the development director for the Matthew Shepard Foundation in Denver, and raising money by going with Matthew Shepard's mother to police stations throughout the country, to schools, talking about love, not hate, talking about accepting these people. I just applaud your efforts, and I hope we can continue to serve that community, because they fight an uphill battle. I know a lot of us are tired of hearing about them, but believe me, if you have a situation, you've got to wrap your arms around that son or daughter who have been born with that, and God, gave them a place in our society, and they should be respected. And thank you very much, Nelson, for letting me talk.
Thank you. What you're saying is so important, and I have not filled this with statistics, but I'll leave you one that tells you the difference in outcome with support or not support. Caitlin Ryan out of University of California has done some studying around family support, and she has a program called the Family Acceptance Project. And so, we all know there's heightened concern about suicidality among young people who are LGBT. But part of what she's demonstrated in her research is that the difference in suicide attempt rates between young people with supportive, affirming families and those who are highly rejecting is 8 times. The suicide is 8 times higher with highly rejecting families, parents. So, it's one of the reasons why, we have a family. We want to support families and parents as well in understanding this, and I think there's too many parents and families who learn after the fact that they reject, and then later, may learn how they may have wanted to behave towards their young people.
I know we're running late on time, but I just wanted to follow up on what Larry said. I have a cousin my age that's gay, and he never came out officially, although his family knew, and some close friends knew, and he's lived a very difficult life in many ways, personally, he's been very successful in career, but just personally, not feeling accepted totally by society. And I think what Larry said is true, and other people, I think you're doing a great service. And I wish my cousin had been able to come to an organization like yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Puts a kind of new perspective on the holidays, doesn't it? We're giving the Rotary International Foundation a gift in your name. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. That's a great honor. Thank you.
I wish you all happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.